Welcome everyone to Transform Magazine's webinar on making your Transform Awards entry count. I'm Andrew Thomas. I'm the publisher of Transform Magazine and the founder of the Transform Awards. And this morning, it's all about tips, tricks, strategies and structures on crafting the perfect Transform Awards entry. Now, people have been asking us to do this for the past few years, and I'm really delighted that we're finally doing it, and doing it with such a fantastic panel of guests. I'm going to introduce them in a moment. But first, well, you know, although we've been asked to organise this, and we have from a number of people over the years, I've actually wondered if it really was the right thing to do, because to some degree, I always felt perhaps the most important thing, surely, is the calibre of the work. Ultimately, you can't polish a lump of coal, and great work will surely always stand out. That's how I used to think, and I think perhaps there's some truth in that. Great work, yeah, sure, it does stand out, but increasingly, the Transform Awards has gained in stature. Now, we know of many instances where companies, when they're drawing up their shortlist of agencies, of brand agencies to approach, companies have drawn up shortlists only of Transform Awards winners. That was flattering, obviously. And we know that the Transform Awards winners book and the website is used as a resource when companies are sourcing agencies. So it made me think that when you've got that much at stake, and when, as we've seen over the past 12, 13, 14 years, agencies producing increasingly better crafted submissions. In fact, if I look back and compare the entries our judges see now compared with those of 10 years ago, the difference is absolutely astonishing. I guess the Transform Awards programme now is really the only true benchmark of the transformative power of brand strategy and design. And if you've done amazing work for your client, it really does make sense to tell the story of that work as well as you possibly can. If every other agency is doing all they can to give maximum differentiation to their submission, well, you don't really want your work to stay in the shadows. So hence this webinar, really. And we've got, as I said before, some fantastic speakers who are going to share some of their insights, some of their experience, and hopefully some of their knowledge. I'm really hoping that if you're listening to this live, then you'll have the opportunity to ask them questions at the moment. Well, let's hear who we're going to hear from. First up, we've got Rebecca Peel. Now, Rebecca is a really experienced marketing professional in the design and creative industries. She's worked with a number of great agencies on their award submissions and their award strategies. And if we just look at Transform, she's won gold in Europe and the Grand Prix in Transform Awards Asia. She's helped agencies like Blue Marlin, Cowan, Brandon, Turquoise Branding, Elmwood, Pearl Fisher, and quite a few others, I'm sure, with their award entries. And hopefully today will help you. Now, we're then going to hear from a couple of winners, people who've come along to the awards night and had to take their trophies home with them. And I'm delighted that we've got a couple of really big winners, actually, who are going to share their thoughts with us today. We've got the marketing director, EMEA, from an agency that really does need no introduction, Landor & Fitch, an agency that continues to produce great work and subsequently, obviously, win great awards, about which it tells the world, and it attracts really great talent. I suppose that's another thing about winning the Transform Awards. It does give you that opportunity to attract talent and in turn win more clients. Now, we've also got Simon Manchip, one of the founders of Someone, who I remember entering the very first Transform Awards. And back then I would have described probably back then as a London agency, but who this year has already won a gold at the Transform Awards Europe, but is already shortlisted for both Transform Awards North America and Transform Awards ANZ, and whose global ambition really does continue unabated. We then thought it would be useful to hear from a couple of our judges, hear from people who have judged both in the past and for the 2023 Transform Awards. And I'm delighted that we've got Andy Gibbard, who's the Global Director of Digital and Brand at SGS, who are the world's leading testing, inspection and certification company, and Jovan Buak, who is the Global Lead for Brand Identity, Creative and Product Design at Virgin Atlantic. You've got to admit, great speakers. All of them, and I'm really pleased. So thank you to all of you. I'm really looking forward to today. At the end, we're going to bring them all together for a big question time. So make some notes as you're going along. Please feel free to use the chat facility. If you've got any questions as you're going along, type them away as we progress, and I'll hold them back for our Q&A session at the end. So let's kick off with our first speaker, Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sparing the time. I would imagine that right now it's quite a busy time for you.
It is, yeah. It's pretty busy, but enjoyable.
Good. Well, you've got the Transform Awards coming up. I think you've got some of those other programs that are also running have their deadlines at a similar time. So thank you for sparing the time. I'm going to switch my camera off now and let you be, because I know you've got a few things to say here. I'll come back in a few minutes after you've shared some of your thoughts and your strategies for your clients.
Okie dokie. Thanks for that, Andrew. So before going into how to write an effectiveness entry, I've just been asked to kind of have a quick rundown of some of the benefits of entering awards. So here they are. Firstly, it's for quality assurance. If you win an award, you've got that impartial seal of approval and instant credibility, which if people are looking to change suppliers, then it sort of mitigates the risk really of doing that. It's an easy decision to make. Secondly, for benchmarking purposes, obviously the awards process whittles out the best of the best. So you can really understand where you sit amongst your competition and potentially make you have an objective look at your business and where you sit against that. Thirdly, brand awareness. Obviously, the award scheme is going to publicise your award wins, but you've also then got the opportunity to think about how you can tell a bigger story, a wider story about your agency or your client business relationships through local press and more wider reaching industry press potentially. The next one's a biggie. Obviously, if you invest in awards and win awards, you're doing some great work, and that shows both existing and prospective talent that you value the work that's done and the people behind it. Another biggie, it's been proven through various surveys that actually award-winning agencies and businesses in general experience significantly higher sales growth. So I think the recent survey by Boost Marketing, 82% of businesses are influenced by awards, and actually it's the number one reason for choosing a supplier is if they're award winning. And also financial financial gains to be had through awards. If you're looking to sell your business, they're always considered in mergers and acquisitions. So if you're looking to sell your business, enter some awards. So that's the benefits of entering awards. So now how to write an effectiveness award entry. I like to look at it through a 3P approach. Firstly, preparation. Make sure your clients are on board. If they're not, don't even bother wasting your time, because you need the data that they're going to give you. Secondly, download the entry guide, note the judging criteria. It's just like being back at school. Read the question twice, work out exactly what the judges are looking for. Sometimes they'll obviously publish judging criteria. Other times it's more hidden in the sort of call for entries. So make sure you really get a good grasp of what they're asking for. And I think that helps with choosing your category. You've really got to know your angle. Transform Awards are great because they have 4 key category themes of content, process, strategy, and type. I think that's right. As well as the visual identity categories. So you know that, broadly speaking, any categories in the process theme are going to be more about the way in which the project was delivered and implemented, and anything in the strategy is going to be more around the strategic thinking behind the solution. So you know, obviously, which one to go down if you've got your angle sorted. The thing I find with whenever I take on an award entry, I like to speak to the creative director, client director, strategist, the whole team involved in the project, because projects can be spun many different ways. So I think by doing that, I can then take the original brief and actually work out what was the real story behind it, what were you really trying to achieve, and then look at how you can tell that story and have the golden thread running throughout the awards entry. And also at this point in time, if you have got your clear objectives, but you haven't got the data to say we've actually made the impact on those objectives, enlist everyone you can in the agency or business to get that data as soon as possible. It makes it life a lot easier. I think on this note as well, I'd like to say just beware of oversubscribed categories, because whilst awards like Transform will award 3 golds, 2 silvers, whatever they feel is right, if the judges are reading lots and lots and lots of entries, then you can expect them to get a bit fatigued, really. And so if you haven't got the story nailed in a compelling way, then you're likely to be passed over because just through awards fatigue. So just be wary of that. And finally, in the preparation, allow plenty of time. Work out how long you think it's going to take you and then double it. The second P, putting pen to paper. Work out your structure. I think this is really important. Is there a template? So Transform have the template. So if you've not already downloaded it, do it now. But once you've got that, use bullet points to get the rough flow. There's no point starting to really trying to perfect the and articulate the main ideas of your story. Just bullet point it. If you've got your angle, you know your start point, you know your end point, bullet point it. Provide any necessary context or significance of the impact in these bullet points as well. You know, the judges are going to be very smart, very knowledgeable people, but they might not know your market inside out. So if you can give enough context to help to explain the significance of your project at this point, then that stands you in good stead. You don't want to spend loads and loads of time on irrelevant stuff, so work out again what your angle is and what is relevant. Again, when it comes to the significance of the impact, be really clear about how that compares to either your starting position or market norms, just so they know whether it's a big deal or not. And the reason, going back to bullet points, I say use bullet points, get feedback at this stage. I think sharing the structure and rough content with any stakeholders, and usually there's a few stakeholders that need to get this entry signed off. This allows for incorporating feedback without having to rewrite lots and lots of paragraphs, or it also allows people to focus on the facts so that you're not getting a lot of subjective view around the language used, etc. It's more about, right, is this the right information? Have we got everything right? Third P, perfecting. Okay, so now's the chance for you to add some personality into your entry. As I said before, the judges will be reading a lot of entries, so you can add some personality to make it memorable. I think it's worth pointing out, though, that don't go too far with the personality, make it puntastic and do all of that kind of stuff. The main aim is still to make it easy to follow, make sure that the judges can see you've hit the criteria that they're looking for. Obviously, keeping to word count is an obvious thing to do, but no one's going to sit there and read and count the number of words that you've got in your entry. But if it feels long, then they're going to get bored. They're thinking, why can't you just do this? If you should be able to keep to word count. And as a rough guide, Transform's really good as well. So you've got 800 words for your entry statement, 4 sections, so you can divide it roughly. But if you're entering a strategic category, then you know you probably want to give a little bit more to the strategy section of the entry, or you know, if it's more a creative one, more in the creative part of the thing. So think about how you want to structure the entry and keep to word count. Again, Transform aren't very prescriptive about how you should present your entry, but I think if you can think about the visual story as well, it really helps the judges. I know that there have been winners in the past who have just submitted Word documents and they've won, and that's cool. But I think if you've got a large part of your work is around how the brand has been transformed visually, then show it. Then use the images alongside the words to help tell the full story. We live in a visual world. I think how you can break up the written word to make it easier to extract key points. I think if it's going to be judged on screen, present it landscape, not portrait. If you think you're going to be over the word count, think about how you can show rather than tell. So this is something that we did when I was working on an entry for Elmwood and Carlsberg. We were in danger of going well over word count because it was quite a complicated entry about design across global markets, and each market had its own regulations that we had to adhere to. So just on this slide, you can see from the previous design that it constantly had new variants being added. It was a multi-tiered brand architecture, and also rather than explaining around how all the brands were using the same category codes, you can instantly see there that everyone was using the apple tree. Also use the supplementary information wisely. Again, this is one that we did. So we wanted to share more context around the design story, but didn't have the word count in the main part of the entry. So I think doing this in the supplementary info really helps to kind of give life to the story a bit better. And then finally, get further feedback. I think at this point, when you've got your entry before you send it to the client, give it to someone in the agency who hasn't worked on the project, who isn't familiar with the project, and ask them what their key outtakes are. Is it what you want the judges to take out of it? Is it in the right category? Have you got your angle right? And at that point, you can then send it to the client for sign off, hopefully, without any amends. I think that's all I've got to say really about how to write an effectiveness entry, but obviously look forward to any questions later.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rebecca. In your experience, kind of having been working at it over both your time with Awarded, but also before that when you were actually in-house with agencies, how have you seen that process change over the past 10 years or so, in terms of the weighting that people have put on awards and consequently then their submissions?
I think awards have become vastly more important over the years, particularly when it comes to recruiting talent. They are really helpful for that, and it's another way of actually getting your brand and what you stand for, particularly if you've got the right award strategy in place, a way of going, yeah, they're the ones I want to work with. So yeah, they've become vastly more important to agencies, and that shows in the fact that, particularly for effectiveness awards, it's changed the whole briefing process. Making sure they're asking the right questions from the clients from the outset, monitoring that as they go through the project, rather than thinking, oh, what can we enter into awards? Let's do that. Oh no, we haven't captured any data. Now we need to make it up or pester the client for 3 years worth of data.
Fantastic. I think that's what we're going to probably hear now from our next set of speakers. But thank you so much, Rebecca. We're going to come back to you at the end for questions. I'm sure that our attendees are going to be having some questions. If you've got any questions you want to ask Rebecca, she's here. She's a resource for when it comes through to submitting your entries. Ask away, and we'll welcome you back later on. Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'll see you later on for the question and answer time. What we'd quite like to do now is bring a couple of our winners, if I may. We've got some great, two great speakers. You can see their pictures coming up, and in fact now they're coming up for real. We've got Kelly from Landor and Fitch, and Simon Manship from Someone. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for taking part today. Now, I think the way we're going to do this, I'm going to get both of you to say a little bit in turn. I think we'll start off with you, Kelly. If you can just sort of say a little bit about your approach to awards. Oh, you didn't have to go disappear, Simon. You could have stayed for hearing Kelly. But you'll be coming next. We'll have a couple of minutes from Kelly, and then a couple of minutes from you. I'll bring you back then in a moment. And then I'm just going to kind of open it up and ask you both a couple of general questions about your approach to awards. But Kelly, perhaps you can kick off and tell us a little bit about Landor & Fitch's approach to not just entering awards. Let's face it, to winning them as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you, Andrew. And thanks for having us here today. I think, at the basic heart of it is that for us, awards is a priority for the business. They sort of run and always have done through the heart of our business globally. So each region takes great pride in sourcing out those local awards that really matter to them, but also at a regional and global level. So it really is a sort of cross-network thing for us. And I think that's because they mean a lot to our people. So, it means a lot for our teams who've worked really hard on their projects to then take that moment of reflection together and really go through those magic moments that they all had sort of on the journey to producing the final piece, and sort of putting it into a nice sort of productive let's say entry, but which also taps into how they got to that creative idea, how they then crafted it, just really getting to the sort of behind the scenes element that gets everyone on the creative teams quite excited. So that's definitely a big draw. And then obviously to that point, I think the teams being on board is the most important fuel for why it's working for us. It's for making sure that awards actually happen right across the board. You've got to have the teams. It's got to be culturally driven. It's got to be sort of switched on internally and celebrated. So that's a huge help for us, and hence why it's so big a priority. And then obviously touching on the celebration aspect, as an agency, we love a good celebration. So that's really important as well. And, those moments have wonderful ripple effects for us, which help drive a huge wave of energy into the next year. So whether that's at an internal level, but also with clients and things, that energy helps keep everything going. So yeah, it's a little bit all of that in a nutshell for us.
Fantastic, thank you. And that was a great nutshell. Simon, perhaps you can just give us a bit of background in much the same way as Kelly, and then I'm going to come back to both of you and ask you some questions. But Simon,
yes,
what about your approach to awarding?
I think we kind of go about it in kind of 5 little chunks. Number one is to realise that with you guys, with the Transform Awards, it's judged by clients, and that adds a very different angle to things. So it's not really worth wanging on about Pantone numbers, and more interesting to talk about what works, right? Because of course it's about transformation. So I think we then go into quite a lot of effort about storytelling to make sure that people actually understand what's going on there. And I really love that kind of method of the hero's journey, where you kind of show the kind of fair maiden you're trying to save and the dragon you're trying to slay along the way, and the tools that you used to hack through it all. We also like to kind of dive into the data to make sure that actually people see that it's worked, because there is I know it's not purely an effectiveness gauge here, but I think it really adds kudos to it that it's not just a pretty picture, but it's something that's actually brought something home for clients, because of course it's judged by clients. And then that kind of feeling of transformation does run through the way that we show stuff now. And I think in the early days we just used to kind of put the pretty pictures on there and hope for the best, but now we very much show kind of where it was and where we took it to, so you can actually see kind of, oh right, you've made quite an impact there. And I think kind of the last thing, which was touched on by Amanda, is not to bang on about things too much, to appreciate that actually the judging process is quite a swift one. You don't have an awful lot of time to make an impact. And so we try and do what I think Michelangelo said, which was he chisels away everything until he's left with David. And I think that's kind of what we want to do with our stuff, is trying to get rid of all the nonsense and try and kind of leave it with a really good impact. So yeah, those kind of 5 approaches are kind of how we kind of go about doing things these days.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I'm going to ask a few questions in a moment, but I'm going to finish with a question. I'm going to tell you the last question now, so you've got a bit of time to think about it. I'm going to ask you about perhaps one of your best wins, and what it was in the submission that you think led to that goal. So you've got a little bit of time to think about that one. But before we get onto that, let's talk a bit about the process in this. And does that start with the right client? The moment that you have that meeting, you think this is going to be someone who's going to be on our side for awards, or does it happen once you start showing them the creativity? Does it start when you get the email from Transform Magazine saying now's time to enter? You think, oh, what can I enter? How's your process? What kind of share some of the process tips on that one, Kelly? How does it work with Landor and Fitch?
Okay, so the process, I think for us, we've got a really good process internally in terms of marketing, being very close to client services. So we're quite sort of in line with the launch timelines, and we use those launch timelines, as ever changing as they are, to sort of keep tabs on exactly what sort of hero projects are going to be going live and when, and using that with the awards team to check on their calendars, because they'll have mapped out all the deadlines and everything else. So it's about just sort of keeping in touch with those. And then in those key launch planning moments, as you plan the launch, we found that the marketing team gets a really good indicator at that time when those conversations are happening with the clients, to get a feel for how they might respond to, bigger conversations of a second wave of launch plans, such as, awards, events, and that kind of thing. So it's really case by case with each client. But I tend to, if I had to say, we tend to pinpoint it at that launch stage on whether a client would be keen and their preferred sort of way of going about it, and then we can come to them with a really nice tailored proposal. And if they would really prefer to be hands off, we know exactly what we want to put forward to them as a process from there on. But if they really want to be hands on and they're up for the journey with us, we make sure that we incorporate those them sort of team leads into the moments and make it fun together. So yeah, I found that the building it in at the launch moment is really helpful for understanding how and who to go with.
Fantastic, and you've got you run EMEA, but of course Landor and Fitch have done incredibly well at the Transform Awards throughout the world. Some amazing work coming out of Asia, out of Middle East, for the Middle East and Africa Transform Awards, and so on.
Yeah.
Is it a similar approach that runs? Have you sort of taken the sort of structure of this process and applied it through the marketing departments around the world?
I think loosely, yes. So as a process internally, there's always an awards team / awards representative in each studio who looks after the coordination of making sure that, awards are diarised. We're having quarterly reviews together with, the right people. So there's that element that's absolutely a constant. And then it's up to the sort of internal studios on how they want to go about it. It's really important for us throughout the world at Landor and Fitch that the ECDs, our executive creative directors, are involved in this whole situation from start to finish. So, previously it would have just been with, the marketing bucket or, another sort of team lead who might be picking up that kind of thing. It's really important for us to have the ECDs involved at decision right through to production, so that they have their sort of steering on it all, because obviously they're closest, but also they know exactly what we want to do in terms of representing the agency creatively. So that's definitely two constants. We have someone looking after the coordination, and the ECDs are always involved.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Simon, we're hearing from Landor and Fitch, obviously kind of a big marketing sort of structure, marketing department. I'm sure you now have that. When you first started entering the Transform Awards, it was many, many moons ago in the much younger days of someone. How has that kind of entry process changed and developed for you over the years?
Yeah, I think that I don't think we really know until we are really there right at the last minute whether it's going to be up to scratch to go to you guys. But I was listening to Desert Island Discs the other day, and John Legend was on there, and they asked him about All of Me, that smash hit he had, and said, did you think it was going to be a hit? And he said, no, I had no idea. And it was only when he started to play it to people that I realised he got quite a reaction. And so I think that we kind of take that view very much, that you kind of just get a general feeling that people start to mention it and talk about it and go, that should go in. And we just listen to the crowd, really. And actually, it's probably heresy to say, we don't really always listen to the client. So actually, the client often is very modest, or is distracted, or doesn't see the kind of value of it really sometimes. So we often kind of pop it through regardless, just on the kind of instincts that we've got and the conversations that people have here, because we have a very open plan, as you probably can see behind me, blurred out as it is for confidentiality purposes. But it's very open plan. People just look over people's screens and just think that's great. So we just kind of listen to the general swell of kind of opinion here, and then go about kind of pulling together with the teams, as Kelly was saying, making sure that it's all coming from the horse's mouths, the right kind of conversations to have, and to structure that good storytelling aspect for the award entry. So yeah, it's quite organic process, but I think every project is considered, but we do very much listen to kind of the groundswell of information.
Do you get different people kind of competing? I mean, presumably there's there's a resource issue, and whilst I'm sure you'd love to enter, maybe some of the other awards programs as well as Transform, or maybe even more categories within Transform, there's always a kind of resource issue. Do you find that you've got different people saying, no, my project is worthy, no, mine? And is there kind of that internal struggle, and how do you kind of decide that process when it comes to the internal voices?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. So, I mean, we are fortunate to have a room full of alphas, and so everyone's competing all the time. In fact, it's kind of like literally a room full of velociraptors that will kind of tear it apart given half the chance. But I think they also are, actually, everyone here is really quite modest and mild and humble. So you don't get quite that sort of bitey approach that you might get in some firms. But I think that actually is very much a meritocracy. So we share a lot of the work at regular intervals throughout the year, and at those kind of show and tells, or work and pubs as we call them, people really get excited about certain projects, and you can kind of tell straight away that those are the ones that are going to go for it. But you do get a few DMs trying to lobby the politicians, but we don't really often need to do that.
And how about you at Landor and Fitch, Kelly? I mean, that's a situation where you've got, say, for instance, just within Europe or within Middle East and Africa, you've got different offices doing different work in different regions. Do you have different voices again competing for that too?
Oh yeah, naturally. It's always the way, isn't it? Like Simon was saying, it's more about, I suppose, listening to the groundswell of what's really getting everyone excited. And then I think also just if let's just say we're all talking about different projects and we're not going forward with a certain couple, a certain awards body, for that year, it's about really explaining why and saying, well, actually, we can do other things with this as well. We can really, and then I've got a whole sort of list of things that we can do to help them feel like it's not just going to sort of sit on the shelf and be forgotten about. So that tends to keep morale high, regardless of whether we're going to sort of proceed with it into an awards entry or not. But yeah, the voices in the room, that's why we sort of tend to have, although it can never really be avoided, while we tend to have just like one representative figure of each of, remember I was saying the ECD, the marketing lead, the awards team, that we try and keep as many sort of people in the room to a minimum so that those decisions can be made as sort of effectively but painlessly as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We're going to come back to you for questions and answers on a more general theme. But just very quickly, in a couple of sentences, I'm going back to that first question that I pitched at you. The award entry that you won, and the reason perhaps why you think it got that gold. Simon. Kelly, all right.
Sorry, I thought I was continuing. Sorry. Go on, Simon, if you like.
I'm sure yours is better, Kelly.
I think so I don't mind who goes first.
I think the award that you're most proud of is the next one, really. But I think the one that we won in 2022 for National Museums Liverpool was great because actually it was a very complicated project. It was 9 museums, and they're museums as well, so they're quite old-fashioned sort of spots. And we managed to radically transform them through the branding. And we kind of wondered whether it was too weird, kind of too much for people. But when we entered it, actually, that really did kick things off, and we got gold for that. So it's really satisfying. And I think the clients also, they were really surprised and really happy about it all. And I think it gave them newfound confidence, and they published it on all their socials, etc. And that confidence helped them recruit and get really high quality people in-house. And actually, it served us really well because now the branding's been really well respected by the in-house teams, and they're really running with it really well, because there's nothing worse than, a year's work and then you just slowly see it all disintegrate because people don't really believe in it, and it just added further cement to that. So yeah, the NML work was terrific.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kelly.
Ours was definitely, for me, the KitKat work that we did that won a gold and a silver in the commerce and creative strategy categories. That's purely because we were given that there was a sort of second phase of an original brief that we were given by Nestle, and we'd done such a wonderful job bringing the chocolatory flagship experience to life in Sao Paulo. And then obviously the sort of pandemic hit a few months later. So we had to sort of scramble around to, I suppose, find a way for bringing that same experience online for Nestle. And we worked so closely together that year in all of what was going on. And then the sort of creative that came out of it, we'd found such a beautiful way of bringing that same experience to be exactly done the same online, using these same experience features, all tapping into that one brand. And it just all felt really sort of harmonic, and also very omnichannel for the time that we were in. The creative was beautiful. I think we were just massively proud of it as a business, and obviously chuffed that it picked up those 2 awards at Transform. So yeah, definitely the KitKat e-com experience for us.
Fantastic, thank you. And for those watching, both those stories and all of the stories behind the winning entries can be found on the Transform Magazine website, transformmagazine.net. Simon, Kelly, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to switch your cameras off now. Come back to us later on. We're going to have some Q&A in a little while. But before we do, I'd like to bring a couple of our next speakers to the webinar. We've got Andy Gibber from SGS and Johan Buek from Virgin Atlantic. Thank you so much for joining us. Both of you have judged in the past, and I know that you're on the program for next year. So not only looking forward to seeing the work, but having already had experience in the past. So thank you very much for giving up your time. It is quite it's not a too small a task, is it? I mean, there is a bit of work that needs doing to be a judge at the Transform Awards. Perhaps you can kind of tell us a little bit about that process of what you need to do. I don't mind who wants to go first. Johan, you're on my right hand side. Tell us a little bit about that process that you need to do on the day and prior to the day too.
Yeah, thank you for having me today, Andrew, and the Transform team. It's great to be here. I think I'm always delighted to be a judge for Transform because fundamentally I believe in the value of brand and the value of design. And I believe that what we do as a branding industry is a really powerful tool for business growth, and it should be respected as such. And I think awards like Transform really help us elevate the story that we're telling and provide credibility, as Rebecca talked about at the beginning of this session. I think for me, it's very much looking at all of the awards in their categories, in their entirety, but really understanding what is the story that's being told here. And I think this is advice I'd always give, really think about the story. What's the beginning, middle, and end? Phrased another way, what was the challenge? How did you solve it? And then what was the business impact? And I think if I see awards that can talk to me in that way, in a really clear, concise way, then they're always going to be the ones that stand out. So that's something I'm always looking for before I even start reading those awards. Can I see those markers? Can I see those tentpole moments in the story? And the other thing that I like to be looking at is, take me on the journey. I almost want to feel the journey you went on. I want to feel like I'm there with you on the project. And I think Kelly used the phrase earlier, behind the scenes. And I think that's really true. And the other thing that I get before I go in, I remind myself, this isn't an agency case study. So I shouldn't just be seeing the beautiful finished product at the end. I want to see the process that you've been through and how you got to that final solution. So those are some of the things I have in the back of my mind before I start reading those entries.
Fantastic. It is remarkable that you really can sense the communicator inherent in the strong entries. As you say, that journey that you're taken on. I think one of the things that so often we hear in the time when the judges are sharing their thoughts on submission by submission is that sense of being taken on a journey with the submission. I think that's you share the sentiments of many a judge there. Andy, tell us a bit about your experience of judging, please.
Yeah, hi Andrew, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. So I've judged for the Transform Awards and the Digital Impact Awards for a few years now. I'm always really excited when the entries kind of land in my inbox. I'm just always really keen to go and see what everyone else is doing, really. I think in a client-side job like mine, it's very easy to be focused on what's going on inside your own organization, and for me to go and see what's happening all around the world of brand and digital comms and so on is really quite exciting. So I've always kind of had a pretty good look through the entries by the time it comes to judging day. But I think, following on from what Jovan said about that kind of preparation phase going into the awards itself, I think what's worth bearing in mind as an entrant is that us as the judges, we're also then your advocates really in that judging session, because there's quite often some slightly heated discussion around what's a good entry and what's not. And you as a judge, you get quite passionate, and you the ones that you really believe in, you really want to express why that's a good entry. And I think there's certain things you can do in your entry to make it easier for judges like us to do that. But that's then the kind of into that session. We're not just then kind of casting a vote or casting a view on your work. We are actively discussing it and discussing the merits of it and arguing over that, sometimes at some length.
I think that one of the things that many people who I come across are keen to know is less what you're looking for. I think ultimately, we sort of can guess a little bit whether we're good at it or not, whether submissives, the entrants are good at it or not is another kettle of fish. But I think you can almost kind of guess what you're looking for. What people really want to know is, what don't you want to see? What are your pet hates when you see in submissions? Jovan?
I think I don't want to see 80 pages of size 10 font. I think the way I see an awards entry is, it's a piece of communication in its own right, and the care, the attention, the design finesse, and the craft that's gone into that award entry is almost as important to me as the work that it's talking about. So I think, use imagery well. Make it easy to read, use killer visuals that really illustrate the point, keep it punchy, call out headlines if you need to. I think that one of the things that's a bugbear for me is when I don't see a link between the creative and the strategy. So I think no matter what category you're entering, really think about how the strategy, the purpose, the brand positioning helped that piece of creative be born, and show us how it all hangs together holistically. Similar with insights, if there were some really great insights that helped unlock that transformational piece of work, please tell us, because we could be looking at two entries that are very similar on a similar project and a similar brief, but the actual insight that then led to that work could be something that really stands out. And I think it was mentioned before a number of times, but humanity is something I really look for, and you can feel when an award entry feels a little bit cold and distant, and perhaps a little bit more like a case study than an award entry. So I love entries that talk about the people who contributed, because at the end of the day, agencies are groups of talented people, amazing creatives, so let's celebrate that as well. And I think things like that, to Andy's point, then give us little nuggets that we can fight for, because they've hooked us emotionally, and that then gives us that that flag to fly when we are arguing as to who gets the final vote.
Fantastic, thank you. Last question to you, Andy. Same thing again, really. What's your pet hate when it comes to those submissions? What instantly kind of makes you think, yeah, let's move on to the next one? This is not less than good.
Yeah, okay, two if I can. The first one, and probably the most important one, is data without context. So the best entries always are strong on the results side. So what it actually achieve, and you know that can be challenging for some categories. But I would encourage you all as entrants really to go and push your clients to get results data for your entries, because that will make them a lot stronger. But when you just see big headline, you know, so many millions of impressions that your project has achieved without any context, I don't know your brand. I don't know what's normal. I don't know if for that particular brand and their audience, that's a drop in the ocean, or if that's really kind of pivoted and really delivered, you know, a meaningful increment for that brand. So do always try to have results data, but just make sure we have some context about, you know, what does that mean for your brand? What's the increment on past performance, or what does that mean versus your competitors, or something to help us to really understand the gravitas of your achievement. And then the second one is it's really off-putting as a judge when you see the same entry just dropped into lots of different event categories without any customization. So I mean, I'm sure there are lots of projects, and I've seen lots of projects which are really relevant across several categories, but the good ones, the entry itself will be tailored towards each category, so you can really tie it to the criteria for that category and see why it is perhaps a worthy entrant for several of those. You know, as judges, we might be the same judges coming across several of your entries. It might be actually that the category that you're strongest in comes up later on when we've already seen your entry a couple of times, and that will actually weaken it really, I think, in terms of that judging process. So I would say be sparing with the categories you enter, and if you do enter several categories, really do tailor it so that we can see exactly why you have merit in each one.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andy Gibbard, Jovan Bujak, Virgin Atlantic and SGS. I'm going to invite our other speakers back to the room. We've really run out of time, actually, so I'm going to, less a quick matter of questions. I'm going to ask all of you for your top tip when it comes to awards. But actually, oh no, there we go. We're all back on now. Fantastic. I'm going to ask you all for your top tip for writing submissions, entering awards programs, collating, whichever part of the awards process you'd like to share with our audience. But before we do that, I'm just going to say a very big thank you. It's the 45 minutes has gone incredibly quickly and has gone over. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the last 45 minutes. But let's just go across the five of you. I'm going to start off with Rebecca, but we'll carry on going through your top tip on either entering an award, on preparing it, on an award strategy, and so on. Rebecca, what's yours?
I think it's know your story, know exactly what you're entering so that you know the right categories to put it into.
Fantastic, thank you. Simon, your top tip, please.
I think you should do what you're probably doing for the brands you're working with, which is just do one thing very, very well and stand for something, because it's an incredibly busy room when you're judging that, and you really want to stand out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. Kelly?
I think mine's more of a sort of process one. So if you have a fantastic journey with a client in getting an awards entry done and it does very well and everything works out fantastic, use that as fodder for a conversation in the future with another client. If you're trying to win them round on getting it done, you know, showing them here's how we did it with, and here's all the success that we had with, really helps make the case and get them on board.
Fantastic. Thank you. Andy?
So show us the purpose and the value of the work. A little bit like Simon said, it's not about the Pantones. It's really about the project and what it achieved for whom. So help us to understand the value that your project delivered, and then make it easy for us to advocate for you in the judging room.
Brilliant. And finally, Jovan.
Connect with us emotionally. That can be in a variety of ways. Show us the steps you went on. Show us moments during the project. So, capture stuff as you go if you can. Think of that award entry in the future that you'll be entering. But give us some fodder that beyond describing the projects and the amazing results it achieved, try and give us something that we can latch onto and fight for in that room for you.
Fantastic. I've got a quick question. It's about big clients, but we really have run out of time for questions. As Jovan and Andy will tell you, I don't have a voice in that judging room, but I have one tip, which is passion. I like to see passion in our submissions and our entries. I like to see passion from our judges, and we do. They stand up for the arguments that they're putting forward on behalf of the work they think is good. And I tell you what, when you win, I like to see passion from our winners. I love to see it when you're up on stage holding that trophy. Fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you. Rebecca Peel, Simon Manchett. Suddenly the slides have disappeared. Kelly, Andy, Jovan, thank you so much for all of you. I've really enjoyed the last 50 minutes. And I hope to see all of you at next year's Transform Awards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.